Anastasia Kamlovskaya, known to her followers as Nastya Gishman, was not just another face on the internet. With over 300,000 fans, she became a symbol of bold self-expression and creative rebellion. Her body was her canvas, her life a performance. And through sheer will, she built an online identity that was both mesmerizing and mysterious. But internet fame is never free. Behind the filters and fans came isolation, scrutiny, and obsession. The more her star rose, the more her private world began to unravel. Surrounded by praise, yet burdened by pressure, Anastasia faced a dangerous truth. The line between admiration and control can disappear without warning. She chased influence, she earned it, and then she vanished. What happened to Nastya Gishman is more than a tragedy. It is a chilling reminder that in the world of online fame, the spotlight does not just illuminate, it can burn everything down. Before we dive into Anastasia's story, take a moment to subscribe and stay engaged. It truly helps the channel grow. Now, let's begin. Anastasia Kamlovskaya was born on February 7, 1996, in St. Petersburg, Russia. She was the only child of her parents, though the family did not remain together for long. Her father struggled with alcoholism and left shortly after her birth, offering no financial support or emotional involvement. Her mother, Alina, raised Anastasia alone, working 2 jobs to support them. They lived in a small dormitory room on the outskirts of the city. There wasn't enough space for a separate bed, so Anastasia shared one with her mother until she turned 12. Even as she got older, she had no private space of her own. The lack of personal boundaries took a toll on her emotional well-being. In 2008, Alina brought Anastasia to the town of Kolpino and left her in the care of her paternal grandmother. Although Anastasia barely knew the woman, they developed a close bond. Her grandmother lived in a modest home, but for the first time, Anastasia had her own room and bed. Her mother's visits became infrequent and eventually stopped after she remarried and started a new family. Alina continued to send money, but her physical absence left Anastasia feeling abandoned. She began to internalize the emotional neglect and turned to art as a way of coping. Her drawings were often dark, reflecting her inner state. Her grandmother provided the only real support system Anastasia had. She encouraged her creativity, gave her space to express herself, and tried to fill the void left by Anastasia's parents. At age 15, Anastasia expressed interest in getting tattoos and piercings. Her grandmother didn't object. She asked if it would make her happy, and when Anastasia said yes, she gave her the money and accompanied her to the salon. This marked the beginning of a transformation. Anastasia began altering her appearance gradually, starting with tattoos. She designed herself. She was drawn to Korean pop culture, anime, and cosplay. She attended conventions and dressed as her favorite characters. Her visual identity became bold and distinctive. Still in high school, Anastasia purchased a basic tattoo machine. She began tattooing herself and later others, earning money from her work. Over time, her skills improved. Her tattoos became more detailed and technically refined. By the time she turned 18, her body was almost entirely covered in tattoos, many of which she had done herself. For the ones she couldn't reach, other artists helped. She also developed an interest in piercings. She had multiple piercings in her ears, nose, lips, tongue, navel, and other parts of her body. She altered her lips, wore colored contact lenses, and often changed her hairstyle and clothing. Her appearance was an evolving work of art. Throughout her youth, Anastasia struggled with emotional and physical health issues. She developed a severe eating disorder, drastically reduced her food intake, and became dangerously thin. Though she eventually managed to stabilize her condition, the effects lingered. Her frame remained delicate, and her health was always a concern. Despite this, she remained focused on her goals. Anastasia started building an online presence. Her unique appearance, combined with her creative content, attracted attention. She gained thousands of followers across various platforms. She leaned into the persona of Nastya Gishman and began treating her body and social identity as forms of performance art. Her following grew rapidly, eventually surpassing 300,000. Her content included photo shoots, live streams, and collaborations with other influencers. She crafted a distinct visual brand that resonated with many people. To her followers, she appeared confident, eccentric, and unapologetically herself. Beneath the surface, however, she remained vulnerable. The isolation from her family, the early feelings of abandonment, and the emotional burden of constantly being observed all took their toll. Anastasia had dreams of starting over. She wanted to leave behind the stress of her current life and move forward with a new chapter. She had made plans and spoken about them to people close to her, but those plans would never be realized. Someone from her inner circle, someone she had once trusted, took that future away from her. However, Anastasia considered her appearance an advantage. Her petite frame allowed her to fully embody the comic book and anime characters she adored. After high school, she enrolled in a technical college and chose a field rarely pursued by young women: automotive mechanics. She had always been fascinated by machines and hoped to one day build a future in that world. At the same time, she was also learning computer programming and web design. Balancing her studies with a part-time job, she worked as a tattoo artist in a local studio. In her spare time, she painted and sketched, constantly creating new, bold characters and visual concepts. At 16, Anastasia launched several profiles across different social media platforms. She shared her photos, original art, and tattoo designs, along with glimpses into her evolving identity, her aesthetic, an intense blend of gothic elements and anime influence, paired with her authentic personality, began to attract attention. Her follower count started to rise. Anastasia had a natural gift for storytelling. She spoke about her hobbies, insecurities, goals, and passions in ways that connected deeply with her growing audience. Many of her fans, especially younger viewers, saw parts of themselves in her, and they supported her journey by commenting, liking, and following. Gradually, she built a loyal and diverse online community: anime enthusiasts, fans of piercings and body art, cosplayers, and creatives. Without planning it, Anastasia had become a rising influencer. As her platform expanded, collaboration and sponsorship offers followed. She realized she could now earn money simply by doing what she loved and sharing it with the world. By the age of 19, Anastasia had saved enough money to move out of her grandmother's house. She relocated back to St. Petersburg, found a position at a well-known tattoo studio, and rented her own apartment. After moving, she rebranded herself with a striking new name, Gishman, and set her sights on a bigger stage. She auditioned for a popular reality show similar to Bad Girls Club, but she didn't make the final cut. The producers felt she was too unconventional. They saw her as more of a creative than the kind of dramatic personality they were looking for. Still, Anastasia wasn't discouraged. She focused even more on her online content, determined to succeed on her own terms. By 2019, at just 23 years old, Anastasia had become a highly sought-after tattoo artist. Her work was in demand, her social media presence was growing rapidly, and she had started mentoring younger artists. She even began offering paid courses in web design. Around this time, she joined TikTok and everything changed. Her visibility exploded. Her following soared to over 300,000, and she was quickly establishing herself as a recognizable online figure. But Anastasia didn't stop there. She had a clear goal: to become a million-follower influencer. She had the talent, she had the drive, she had the momentum. But then she met a man who would derail everything, someone who first shattered her spirit and then took her life. His name was Dmitri Chernesev. Dmitri Chernesev was born on February 15, 1998, in the city of Moscow. His mother died when he was still very young, leaving behind only the faintest memories. His father remarried not long after, and Dmitri was raised by a stepmother who showed him little affection. The home lacked warmth, and Dmitri grew up withdrawn and emotionally neglected. He was a quiet, lonely child who spent most of his time drawing. As he began school, he enrolled in a local art studio, where he made his first real friendships. For the first time, he started to come out of his shell. During his teenage years, Dmitri's behavior began to shift. He became more social, both offline and online. On social media, he shared music he liked, poems he wrote, and reflective thoughts. Many of his posts focused on themes like loss, death, and emotional pain. His words often hinted at deep sadness and a longing for connection. However, his writing style was clumsy and at times a bit unsettling. Dmitri spoke openly about his fascination with walking through cemeteries. He claimed he found peace in reading the inscriptions and studying the photographs of young women on gravestones. He would imagine what their short lives had been like, what dreams they might have carried, and how their stories had ended so early. Alongside these reflections, he often shared tattoo designs, mostly illustrations of cars, and handwritten Japanese kanji phrases. On several occasions, he described what he believed to be the ideal partner, but his descriptions didn't just focus on personality traits. They also emphasized very specific physical features and age ranges. These posts made many feel uneasy, especially considering that at the time, Dmitri was already in a serious relationship. His girlfriend, Margarita, had been with him since high school. She shared many of his views and supported his ambitions unconditionally. So when Dmitri decided to relocate to St. Petersburg in 2017, she didn't protest. In fact, she took full charge of the move. Margarita bought the tickets, secured an apartment, and handled all the planning. She worked tirelessly to set up their new life from scratch. To get by financially, both of them began offering freelance services. They took on web design projects, software development jobs, and any other short-term work they could land. Dmitri also nurtured his passion for car restoration, looking for opportunities to gain experience in the field. At some point during this period, Dmitri decided to start creating adult-themed content. The exact moment is unclear, but when he did, he brought Margarita into the project. She became not only his business partner, but also his on-camera collaborator. Dmitri took on the role of producer and performer, creating the storylines, designing costumes, and directing the shoots. The two of them worked closely together, blurring the lines between their personal relationship and the roles they played on screen. Despite the controversial nature of the content, and the fact that much of it was shared without proper authorization, it started generating a modest but steady income. However, Dmitri kept most of the money for himself and made all the financial decisions. Margarita didn't seem to mind. She trusted him completely and looked to him for guidance. By 2020, Dmitri had bought himself a Mercedes-Benz, something he proudly flaunted across his social media profiles. It's also worth noting that Dmitri had 2 prior convictions, one for theft, committed before his move to St. Petersburg, and another for evading mandatory military service. Because of these offenses, he was legally prohibited from leaving the country, but that restriction didn't seem to bother him. Margarita first met Anastasia Gishman when she visited her studio for a tattoo. The two women connected instantly. Anastasia worked with great care, and Margarita was thrilled with the result. So when Dmitri later wanted a new tattoo, Margarita didn't hesitate to recommend Anastasia. Calling her one of the best artists she'd ever met, Dmitri brought in a design sketch, and together with Anastasia, they refined it and scheduled multiple sessions to complete the work. From the very first meeting, there was an undeniable spark between them. As they spent time together, their conversations grew more personal. They realized they had a lot in common. Both came from broken homes, both lacked emotional support. Growing up, and both were artistic souls with a shared love for tattoos, anime, and cars. Most importantly, they were both hungry for fame and willing to do whatever it took to achieve it. Their bond deepened quickly. They began attending car meets, tattoo expos, and anime events together. What started as friendship soon turned into a secret romance. They tried to keep it hidden. Dmitri was still in a committed relationship with Margarita, whom he had dated for nearly 5 years. But it didn't take long for Margarita to figure out what was going on. She regretted ever introducing Dmitri to Anastasia. At first, she tried to talk things through calmly, but Dmitri's answers were vague and dismissive. Eventually, she began confronting him, directly voicing her jealousy, demanding honesty, and asking him to end the affair. Dmitri made promises, but he never kept them. Margarita watched the relationship slip away, powerless to stop it. She had sacrificed so much for him, left her hometown, entered a controversial industry, supported him emotionally and financially, and now he was walking away for Anastasia. Things only got worse when it became public that Dmitri had bought Anastasia a luxury car, something he had never done for Margarita. No one believed anymore that their relationship was purely professional. Heartbroken and overwhelmed, Margarita reportedly damaged the car in a fit of distress and even made threats about harming herself. But none of it stopped Dmitri. He moved out of their apartment and moved into Anastasia's home. By then, Anastasia was already a prominent figure online with hundreds of thousands of followers. Her new relationship became a trending topic among her fans. Dmitri's social media presence began to grow rapidly. He was gaining attention simply by being with her. For someone like Dmitri, who had always craved fame, this was exactly what he wanted. He became Anastasia's manager, handling her online image, producing content, and overseeing her core sales. Their business boomed. Her brand continued to rise, but for Dmitri, it still wasn't enough. Soon he convinced Anastasia to join him in creating adult-themed content. He promised her more fame, more money, and a bigger platform. Anastasia agreed. They started filming together, renting studios, or using their home to create and distribute videos across various sites. Her career took a sharp turn, but her popularity kept climbing. Dmitri began referring to her as his muse, showering her with gifts and praise. But behind the scenes, it was Anastasia who was making the real sacrifices, raiding away parts of her identity, her privacy, and eventually, her sense of safety. In early 2022, Anastasia was invited to appear on the talk show Beyond the Line to speak about her rise to fame and the evolution of her career. She saw it as a great opportunity to connect with a broader audience. She accepted the invitation without hesitation. However, that night would be the last peaceful moment Anastasia would ever know. When she returned home after meeting with Carol, she had no idea that Dmitri had never really left, despite their breakup and the fact that she had asked him to move out. Dmitri had managed to keep a copy of her apartment key. Fueled by jealousy, fear of irrelevance, and a complete loss of control, he waited for her in secret, watching and planning. In the early hours of August 1st, 2022, Anastasia entered her apartment alone. As she closed the door behind her, Dmitri emerged from the shadows. The confrontation escalated quickly. Anastasia likely had no time to react. According to forensic reports, there were signs of a violent struggle. She was struck multiple times and suffered severe injuries. Ultimately, Dmitri strangled her to death. Then, in a chilling attempt to erase the evidence, he stayed in the apartment with her body. For the next 2 days, he cleaned the crime scene, deleting files from her devices, wiping surfaces, and trying to hide all traces of his involvement. But no matter how careful he was, the truth was impossible to bury. When Anastasia didn't respond to messages and failed to post online, her friends immediately grew suspicious. Carol, the last person known to have seen her alive, raised the alarm. Anastasia's inner circle began calling, texting, and trying to reach her in every possible way. There was no answer. On August 3rd, police were finally alerted and forced their way into her apartment. What they found was horrifying. Anastasia's body was discovered hidden under a blanket in her bedroom. There were bruises and injuries across her neck and face, and it was clear this had not been an accident. An investigation was launched immediately. The authorities traced her last known movements and checked security footage from around the apartment. It didn't take long for them to identify the prime suspect, Dmitri Wanshov. He had vanished the same day Anastasia was last seen. A nationwide manhunt began. Authorities circulated his photo and called on the public for help in tracking him down. Meanwhile, Anastasia's fans flooded social media with tributes, disbelief, and anger. Her final posts were filled with desperate comments, people begging for her to respond, not knowing she was already gone. Within days, Dmitri was located hundreds of kilometers away, attempting to flee using false documents. He was arrested and taken into custody. During interrogation, he confessed to the murder, showing no visible remorse. His only concern seemed to be how the public viewed him now. Anastasia Gishman, a young woman who rose from hardship, built a life out of creativity, and inspired hundreds of thousands, was gone taken by someone who claimed to love her. But her legacy did not end there. The public demanded justice. Fans, friends, and fellow creators pushed for a full trial, transparency, and harsher penalties for violent partners. Anastasia's story sparked discussions across the country about domestic abuse, toxic relationships, and the dangers hidden behind curated online lives. Her family, devastated but determined, launched a foundation in her name focused on supporting victims of emotional and physical abuse in creative industries. Though her life was cut short, Anastasia Gishman's voice continues to echo through the lives she touched, and her story serves as a powerful reminder of how quickly love can turn into obsession, and how silence can cost someone everything. However, the grief surrounding Anastasia's death was only amplified by the chaos that followed. The sentencing of Dmitri Chernesev to just 8 years in a maximum security prison stunned the public. For many, it felt like a slap in the face not only to Anastasia's memory, but to every victim of domestic violence who had been silenced. Court's verdict was based on Dmitri's partial confession and his claims that Anastasia had wanted to die. But to those who truly knew her, that idea was unthinkable. She had dreams, plans, a future waiting in South Korea, and a growing relationship with someone new. Her apartment was filled with signs of a life in motion: suitcases, business documents, travel research. She was on the verge of beginning a new chapter, not ending one. Public outrage erupted. Social media lit up with disbelief and fury. Thousands of people signed petitions demanding a review of the sentence. Influencers and activists spoke out, criticizing the legal system for accepting Dmitri's version of events and minimizing the brutal, premeditated nature of the killing. Anastasia's fans remembered her not as the girl from a scandal or tabloid headline, but as an artist, a creator, a survivor who had pulled herself from a difficult childhood into a life she had designed. On her own terms, her grandmother became the voice of truth in the aftermath. In interviews, she mourned her granddaughter with quiet dignity, but openly condemned her own daughter, Anastasia's mother, for selling access to the funeral to the media. The images were broadcast widely, showing Anastasia's final resting place wrapped in cameras and microphones. For many, it felt like her privacy had been violated one last time. But in the end, Anastasia Gishman's story became more than a tragedy. It became a call to action. Her life, her art, and the circumstances of her death ignited conversations about emotional abuse, toxic relationships, and the failures of the justice system to protect women from partners who turn violent when they lose control. She wanted to be a living piece of art, and, in a heartbreaking way, she succeeded. Her story now lives on through her fans, through every tattoo she inked, every video she posted, and every life she touched. Anastasia Gishman may be gone, but her voice still echoes and people are still listening. Thanks for watching, everyone. Your support means a lot to me, and you can help my channel grow by hitting that like button, dropping a comment, and sharing this video. Your engagement really makes a difference. See you soon.